Hey Dragon Ball Super family, I'm Legends Michael Kerrick, and I just got back from NAWCQ Dragon Ball Super from Orlando, Florida, or like Kissimmee, something like that. I had a blast. I went X1 day 1, finishing 5th in Swiss, and then day 2 I hard punted into what is supposed to be a favorable matchup into Sin. On the play, nonetheless, both times. The only thing I lost to day 1 was ramp coup, like that 7 coup ramp coup, and then day 2, of course, I lost to uh, Sin Shenron. It was a really good deck. I built the deck to like snipe out red all day, and I did snipe out a lot of red. I beat a handful of SS4 Gojitas. I took out a Sin. I took out a red-blue launch. And a Vegito. And then I struggled into Android 16, but managed to pull out a win. And uh, and I took a win over Gamma at the very end, leaving me with an X1 record. But I'm gonna quickly go into this deck list and talk about some of the decisions I made for Nats and some of the playstyles. You know how these go already, and then some things I would change going into the following format. So we have the Gamma 1, Gamma 2 leader. Front side standard leader. You awaken if you have a 2-drop Unison, specifically. You otherwise just draw 1 on attack. You can't use other cards to change to add energy, like non-red ribbon cards. So you can't use like the original Android 18 speedy substitution card. And then on the back side, once you awaken, it's an untap 1, draw 1. Instead of drawing when you attack, you now draw at the end of the turn, and only if you pick up exactly 3 androids, like blue androids from your energy, and then place down up to 3 blue androids. And then, so you pick up the androids, you'll draw a card, then you'll put down 3 androids. So that's a really neat effect because there aren't many effects that can punish you for this. Maybe just like Dende to my knowledge. Otherwise, it constantly gives you 3 energy to work with every turn, so that's pretty cool. So as usual, I'm going to go through the deck in like Mulligan order and playstyle order. So for starters, we have our first 2 Mulligans. We have 4 of the Android 14 and 15, the Ravagers. This is simply just a discard from your hand searcher that lets you look for any red ribbon army battle card. I think probably blue, if I had to guess. 5 or less, and then, yeah, blue. 5 or less, and then, of course, also allows you to add specifically this Unison Android 17 and 18 teaming up. Play this card at 4 because obviously you need to find your Unison to play. One of the reasons I lost my first match into Sin, or my first game into Sin in my top cut play, is I kind of got nervous last night. I was asking people for advice, and I decided to go with the strategy where I didn't play my Unison on 2, and I just got my face kicked in. So don't do that. Just play your Unison on 2 and have some kind of energy to block their double strike crit attack. Speaking of the Unison, we have 4 copies of Android 17, 18 teaming up. This is my only 2-drop Unison because it can be searched from this. A lot of people choose to play the hit. I elected not to. I made sure I checked this deck out for red, and then I would just side heavily into blue, and we'll go into the side. But this Unison is incredible. Once per turn on both players' turn. The first time either player attacks, this Unison automatically gains a marker, and then you may combo with a blue 0 for 5k from the drop. Why this is so important with the skills negated. Why this is so important is because it lets you constantly generate Z energy in this deck. Not to mention it makes the first attack you deal is 5k stronger, and it also makes the first attack on your opponent's turn, they have to deal with a 20k wherever they're attacking, right? So the fact that it constantly generates Z energy allows us to make such a variety, like a large variety of Z plays, and that's super cool. And we don't have to sacrifice any like real combo power for Z energy, so that's super cool. And that's another reason why I play 4 copies of this searcher here, because it feeds this effect. Not only does it find this Unison, but it feeds the ability to generate Z energy. If you're trying to like starting to learn or if you're just starting to learn the deck, get used to not putting the 0 for 5k in the Z energy if it's your only 0 for 5k in the drop. That way you can have access to the little 5k boost on your opponent's turn as well. Of course, you kind of have to have a read on your opponent. If they're playing blue, they might have access to Smoky Dragon, which will immediately remove your Unison. So in that sense, like if you have that read, then you can go ahead and just Z it anyway so that you don't miss out on that effect. Oh, this has an additional effect. It's got an activate -4. It gains dual attack and 10k power. This is a really cool way to just add pressure or clear 2 battle cards in the field. A lot of people try to save this effect. The moment I hit 5 on this Unison, I just go ahead and down tick it down to 1 to get that value for the 2 attacks in. And then additionally, it also becomes a negate on your opponent's turn because now that it's down to 1 marker, your opponent's like, oh, I only have to invest 1 or 2 attacks into it to kill it. So now they spend 2 attacks attacking this card, and you still get your Z energy back on your opponent's turn. So that's a really cool thing. Moving into the androids that you want to play from your energy. For the Mulligan strategy, I usually try to find one of these two, and then as soon as I have at least the Unison, I try to find these, and if I have both, which means my hand is set up, then I'll go ahead and look for one of these following 10 cards, right? Or 11 cards. So we have, at least so that you at least have a good energy going to your game. So first off, we'll start with the drum of the deck, Android 17 Rebellious Will. He's just a 15k for 1 energy. He can he may play from your energy. So if your opponent responds with like God Sealing or some kind of counterplay effect that would put him in the drop otherwise or prevent him from being played, you can just choose not to resolve his effect, or rather you resolve it by not playing him from your energy. That way you don't get punished. But he does play himself from your energy for 1 energy. And once he is played, however he's played, you may look at the top 5 cards of your up to the top 5 cards of your deck. It doesn't matter because you're going to shuffle anyway, so you might as well look at all 5. Then you choose 1 blue android from there, and you put it in your energy. And then you have to, regardless of whether you find an android or not and put it in your energy, you must send one of your energy back to the deck, bottom of the deck, and then you'll shuffle up your deck. I forgot to mention that the leader reads infinite times amount per turn. If you play a blue card from your energy, your leader automatically replaces that energy with the top card of your deck in rest mode. So that's pretty cool. That's how you kind of have like a 2-hand thing going. You have your hand, and then you have your hand in your energy, allowing you effectively like 0.5 more resources than your opponent. So the reason why I play 4 copies of this guy, of course, he has barriers, just so sticky to deal with, right? Like he's a 15k attacker, so he connects with most leaders. If your opponent tries to attack to clear him, your Unison will protect him once, making him a 20k. He doesn't get cleared for free by your opponent's removal effects. He's just so annoying. And then, like, honest, if you're just looking for combo power, you can play him from your energy and just leave him in active mode, so you have extra combo power. So he's just so strong in that sense. I mean, the fact that Drum was limited to 1 because he had barrier kind of gives you like an example of how powerful this is, just on the fact that he has barrier. And then we'll move on to his sister, Android 18 Rebellious Will. So Android 18 Rebellious Will, it's kind of like a slightly worse version of her brother. She also may play from the energy for one blue energy, but then when she's played, she does the exact same thing where she looks at the top 5, right? And she finds a blue android, puts in energy, then you must bottom deck an energy. It can even be the one you chose, and then you shuffle your deck, right? But the downside is obviously she doesn't come with barrier, so that's why we play 1 or 2 less of her. I've been kind of bouncing between the 2. I did end up going with 3 because she does have critical, which does help us in our blue matchups. And a lot of times versus Sin Shenron, we're just leaving them at 7 life, right? And then if we do ever swing at their leader to get them down to 6, we'll just hit them with the crit. They'll either give us 2 cards or we'll just leave it at the crit. And one of the greatest things about this leader is you don't have to swing with your leader to get the draw. So you can just play a really relaxing, like sit back, control the game, just crit your opponent down and force their turns. Like any kind of threats they play, you just get rid of, and you slowly whittle their life down to a point where you can just burst their turn down on like turn 4 and 5. So we play 3 copies of her. She does get kind of floody. Oftentimes we're just throwing her away as combo power. And of course, the last card we want to open in our mulligan, in addition to our Unison, is this 4-drop Android 17 and 18 Limitless Energy. For 1 blue and 1 green, you can play them from your hand or energy, and they have Deflect, which is super powerful. The dual attack effect is also super relevant. It lets you clear a lot of battle cards, and even further added to the battle card ability is this auto. When this card is played, choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards with energy costs equal to or higher than the energy and send it to the bottom of the deck. So it provides this deck with some premium removal for those early aggro threats. It even allows you to remove threats that they played on curve, which is really nuts. The only thing it's missing is that it doesn't ignore barrier. Keep track of how many of these you play a game, though, because your boss monster does require green energy, and this is the only green energy I'm playing in the game, or in the deck. Speaking of boss monsters, we have the second to last card that we can play out of our energy. We have 4 copies of Cell, the Ultimate Bio Android. This is obviously the boss monster of the deck. For 1 green, 1 blue, and 2 colorless. The 2 colorless does come up. You can play this card from your hand or energy. And then it gets double strike for the duration of the turn. One thing to note, all of these cards that play from energy are limit 1. That's how they limited the deck from being just 2 busted. And then if this card is played from your energy, you can choose to bottom deck all of your opponent's battle cards that do not have barrier. And then it's got this really nifty auto where it once per turn if your opponent negates this card's attack or activates a counterattack skill in response to this card's attack, they place one card from their hand at the bottom of the deck. So that's really cool. It punishes your opponent for negating it. It's also a dual attack forever, and then a double strike on the turn it comes in. Once again, also having deflect means it can't get punished by God Sealing, and it's too tall for the Frieza counterplay. So that's pretty cool. It does lose to Dirty Burst, so if you're playing into blue, or anything that has 2 blue energy in it, I probably wouldn't cast into those matchups. They usually leave two or more blue energy up to Dirty Burst this card. So you can just go wide, you play a bunch of your 15Ks, you maybe play this dual attacker, go into your Z deck, just punish him for leaving the 2 blue up and force him to combo out instead of just, slamming Dirty Burst and you wasted your whole turn. Of course, that being said, if you just need to clear their field and like their field is all 5 drops or 6 drops and higher, then you obviously have to use Cell and then you just have to use it. Can't be helped. And then the last card that we played in this deck that can be played from my energy is Android 19 Energy Absorber. So Android 19 Energy Absorber, we played 3 copies. It's really just our respect card for this Red Sin Shenron deck, and kind of for Gogeta as well, SS4 like Goku, Vegeta. It gives us a really good early game negate to get at to avoid those double strike crits and those triple strike crits when we're still trying to get our feet like on the ground. And then versus SS4 Vegeta and Goku, it lets you like negate the leaders to like make their awakenings more awkward. Once they are awakened, you can negate the leader on their first swing so that if they do play a card, they can't get the value for comboing it. So that's a big deal. It's just a 1 energy negate the attack, play this card, and then has a permanent. You can activate this card as a negate from the energy by discarding a card from hand. You like never want to do that. Some of the advantages this does have, though, is that it can be searched with your searcher in case you need it in a pinch, and of course all your android can search it and put in your energy, so it's like another way to search like a 1 energy negate. Afterwards, it's really just combo fodder. 4K means it can't really attack, and honestly, in the next format, I would probably replace this with the Android 17 TP. It's the 1-drop blue Android 17 that just came out of these most recent TPs. The downside to that card, though, of course, is that it's not a Red Ribbon Army, so it's not searchable through this, but it is still searchable by all the other means. And then we'll move on to our more defensive package of the deck. We have 4 copies of Android 8, Kindhearted Machine. So, with the format being really focused around red, I wanted to make sure I had super combos that would let me draw out of their attacks, out of their significant pressure, right? And of course, we all know about the Boogeyman, the Gogeta 8, that if we don't Dirty Burst, we need to be able to have the super combos to combo out of. Or even worse, like we Dirty Burst and they Z Awaken, then we can't get rid of it, so now we have to be able to combo out of. So that allows us to do this. And once again, it being a Red Ribbon Army super combo, it means we can search it off of this card. We really don't need the untap in this deck. There's a small okie doke you can do with the untap super combo, but other than that, it's not very relevant. And then, of course, the bottom deck super combo is much more relevant if we were in a blue meta, and which we might be now. Now that I've actually concluded Nats, I realize that maybe blue-green super combo would have been better if I'd made it past top 32. But all the way up until top 32, like all of day 1, I preferred and glad I had this super combo instead. It's also always a 0 for 10k, so that's nice too. For our defense, we played all 4 copies of Android 14 Inorganic Horror. This is, once again, just another respect card to red. Usually I would play 3 copies of this, but due to Sin being so prominent and SS4 being just so prominent and aggressive into this deck, especially like the Scion version, you gotta have some kind of floodgate, right? The function of this card, it's simply just like, much like Topo, if your leader card is a blue ribbon army, something like that. You can discard a card from your hand and then play this card. And then if it's successfully played, your opponent must bottom deck 2 cards from their hand every time they want to attack for the rest of the turn. That's with anything. Once again, it's searchable with this and, of course, all the other searcher androids. So, like, much of this deck is searchable, and you can kind of fix what your hand wants to be, which is really nice. And then for the cards that you would oftentimes discard are just extra copies of Unisons that you don't need, or extra copies of this cards that you run out of, like, you don't need anymore. Whatever you really feel fits the situation. This card allows us to stall for quite a few turns if you really think about it, because turns 1, 2, and 3, or turns 1 and 2, most people aren't hitting you very hard, and then you have the 1-drop negates for the decks that do hit you very hard, wherever they are. This guy, and then turn 3 you can kind of start like floodgating them, right? And if you have 4 copies of this plus these negates, you can imagine that you can stall out for like upwards of 7 turns, right, before you even have to use hatch. So that might add 8 turns of floodgate stalling. That's really irritating for your opponent to play too. Sure, it does chop away your hand, so you have to consider that. Sometimes you're going to want to just take some life, bait your opponent into attacking you into unfavorable trades. That way you can kind of change the hand parity in this game. But the 4 copies does come up often because versus Sin, you can awaken on 2 with your Unison, right? Then you can like activate Dimension Magic, which you'll see later in the deck, and then now that sets you up for 2 energy for this. In case their turn is like crazy on their 3 and you just couldn't find like a Dirty Burst or something. So this deck does put, or this card does put in a lot of work. And then our last Android that I play, or I hopefully think it's the last Android I play, is the Android 17 Turning the Tide. It just gives you a final answer to the game. I actually punted my last game of Nationals by playing this card prematurely. But it does wipe both of your hands, and since you've been burning a lot of your hand for this card, like you are likely going to be have less cards in hand than your opponent, unless you just manage to stabilize with Boo Unison. It is an Android, so you can charge it early and then pick it up with your leader effect by turn 6 to be able to use its effect on turn 7. So that's pretty cool. You don't have to have a dead card sitting in your hand, and you don't have to play something silly like Zeno unit or Zeno Super Combo to pick it up. Which, by the way, you can't even play in this deck. This leader locked you out of all non-Android effects that are 7 costs and lower if you use the auto. The turn you use the auto to pick up energy. But yeah, it's just standard. Like, you can build a board versus the decks that can't deal. Like Sin, they can't really deal with this card, especially if you keep clearing the field. And then on the turn, if they just couldn't get like an 8-drop Sin down to defend themselves on your Turning the Tide turn, you can just slam Turning the Tide and the game's over. So it's a cool way to close out games. Moving into some tech choices, since I'm a blue deck and this card is like effectively a blue card, we play 3 copies of Smoke Dragon. Accumulated negativity. This card's ridiculous. It's got deflect. It can't attack, but that doesn't matter because it just becomes Z energy after you play it. And then it's got one of these like 3 broken effects that you can choose from. The first effect is place up to 3 cards from your deck into your drop, so you mill up to 3. And then if both you and your opponent together have 7 cards, like combined, you can draw 2 cards. So effectively, it's a pay 2, draw 2, right? Like in any other color that except for blue, that would be horrible since you can't afford the energy. But in this deck, you can pick up 3 energy at the end and put it back down. So you just drew 2 cards and gained a 5k combo power, right? You can use that 5k combo power off like a leader swing. If you have the Unison developed, you can turn that into a 25k attack, or you can have 2 20k attacks, right? Like leader swing can attack, get the Unison combo, the free combo, then you can swing with the Unison and combo this off. Now you got 2 20k attacks, and you got 2 Z energy, and you drew 2 cards. Like there's not much more value that you can get out of that. The second effect is also ridiculous. You can choose one of your opponents. It's probably the third effect I'm thinking about, but you can choose one of your opponent's Unisons that are 2 drops. That's a 2-drop or less and has 7 or less markers on it, and you can just warp it from the game. So that kind of makes 2-drop Unison decks kind of rough to play. Sometimes it even backfires because like it hits this. Your opponent can choose to hit this with their Smokey, but it does let you clear some really nasty red Unisons like the Gogeta one. Lets you clear Gotenks Unison, some ridiculous. And then the Mirror, of course, it lets you clear your opponent's 17, 18. Honestly, the prevalence of this card kind of makes me want to play a deck that isn't a 2-drop Unison deck, but I mean, we'll see in the future. But the card is snapped. And then the third effect is you can pick any yellow card in the game, ignoring Barry, and warp it. I'm kind of kidding on that, but it does make yellow a significantly worse color when this card exists for blue decks, because the effect really does read choose any battle card, choose one of your opponent's battle cards of energy cost 7 or less, ignoring Barry, and send it to the opponent's warp, right? Like that made so many cards insignificant in this game. It ruined Another World Blitz. It ruins the Vegito Z card. The entire color of yellow is just pointless as a result of this card, as long as you're playing blue. And then, of course, it lets you also bypass stuff like Borgos, which the Borgos that prevents Dimension Magic, this lets you clear that off without having to find like some ridiculous answer to it, right? And then some of like Yellow's best threats like Slugs get cleared off, so that's really powerful. And then like Vegito, they sometimes leave that 5-drop Patara in play so they can like Okie Dokie you with their 2-mana activate battle. Well, you can just play this and remove that and then like push through, because that deck doesn't really have defense outside of that. So I actually did that in one of my games during day 1. The card's ridiculous. I nearly considered playing 4, but you can't really resolve this card until turn 3, right? Like there's a world maybe versus like a super slow deck, you resolve this on 2 instead of your Unison, and then like maybe like that's where you would want 4 copies, but otherwise you can't really resolve this till turn 3 and beyond. So for that reason, I really only played 3 copies of it. I did forget to mention that while your leader like on the front side gets to draw an attack, like in theory, you would get more value if you attack on your front side like until turn 3 and then awaken, right? Like that's like I'm pretty sure that's what Bandai like suggested. But being able to immediately go to a 15k side, take 2 of your life or down to 6 to the point where you like those weren't crit, so you actually got that life, and then now you become a 15k leader, and your Unison makes your leader a 20k in the first swing. Like that's significantly more value than just sitting on a 10k and trying to draw a card, right? Like that card you drew that you would have drawn is probably going to be what you have to give up to defend your 10k leader, since like every leader in this game now awakens on turn 2, like every real leader. But yeah, Smokey. Sorry, huge rant, but Smokey Dragon broken for the game. Too good. More defensive cards. We have Realm of the Gods, Beerus Destroys. So, fun fact, this is one of the few decks I've ever built that are like 52 cards, and that's just because we deck out. There's so much cycling in this version of the deck. If I was playing the bottom deck super combos, I'd probably go back to 50. But since I'm playing the draw super combos, I found myself oftentimes just decking out on defense. So I bumped it to 52, and because I'm playing 52, I had to play extra copies of some cards. And one of those is Realm of the Gods, Beerus Destroys. This is really just a way to answer turn 1 critical attackers, which like every deck, I swear, tries to sneak in now. They're like, oh my god, Herder, we're going to crit you on turn 1. I must have caught like 7 games with that. People would just slam down in one drop. I would like charge and pass. People would slam down in one drop, like swing crit, and then combo 5k, and they'd be like 20k crit, and I'd be like, that's crazy. I'll draw a card and send that to the bottom. So this card obviously does that, but more importantly, it's a really good answer to Rush Attack Vegeta, right? Like if you have just the Unison developed, it's really tempting for the red player to attack with Rush Attack Vegeta before giving it Barrier. Sometimes they'll just try to get value and try to attack one of your battle cards and then use the ability to reduce your Unison. So in that world, you can just use Realm of the Gods, Beerus Destroys to punish that play heavily. You traded 1 energy, drew a card, whereas they traded 2 energy and got nothing done, except for maybe remove a marker. So that's really strong too. Versus Sin, of course, it has the advantage of being able to send down the Hazes, the Novas, the Ices, if they poorly sequence their turn out. So that's really cool. Otherwise, it's really just an additional super combo in your deck. Oftentimes, I do throw this card away when I'm discarding for the Android 14 counterattack, because this card does get really cloggy. It's really hard to... despite the fact that you get 3 energy every turn, it's really hard to actually have enough energy to resolve this effect unless you resolve Boo Unison. And then, of course, 3-dimensional magic. It's standard D magic. I went with 3 because I was afraid of the amount of like Mai's, like the anti-D magic cards like Morgos and Mai. So I went down to 3 and I played 3 copies of this 1-drop negate. Honestly, I thought that was the right choice, mainly because the 1-drop negate also is searchable and D-Magic is not. There's going to be many times when you're comboing out, you're just going to need extra 5Ks to combo with, so D-Magic just wasn't great in that scenario. Of course, D-Magic is still a great blue card. It sets, especially because your Floodgate costs 2 energy, so D-Magic gets you those 2 energy back, so that's pretty cool. Or at least gives you 1 of those energy back. In this red... Well, I mean, I say in this red meta, but in this meta with Red Sin, SS4, Goku, and Vegeta, and then Gamma, like, being part of the game, Dirty Burst just does so much work, right? Like, you always have 3 energy going to your opponent's turn, so you always have access to Dirty Burst. You can punish any big play they do. And at worst, it's just a 1 energy negate, counter attack. But most of the time, it cycles itself. It lets you outplay Crown of Retribution. So if your opponent casts Crown, you just slam Dirty Burst in response, you draw a card, you no longer have 2 energy untapped. 2 or more energy untapped, so they don't look at your hand, and you prevented their big play for the turn. Versus Sin, that's like crucial, because when they go into their turn 3 or 4 and they slam Crown, they want to play the 8-drop, right? So you just slam Dirty Burst in response. Now you beat out the Crown and you beat out the 8-drop, and then if they go into Rush Attack, well, that's crazy. You have this Realm of the Gods Beerus card to punish that card, So it's just, and then like of course if they activate main instead, you can just hard negate it with the D magic or this little 1-drop negate. It's just so favorable if you don't play poorly, and that's exactly what I did in my match. I just played poorly. My opponent played really well. Final defensive card that I'm playing, I think. Nope, never mind. Is Sun Gohan Pyro Claim. This is actually where I go into like the tech section of the deck. So not every Gamma deck might have these cards, or these numbers of these cards. So here we go. Sun Gohan Pyro Claim, the blue SGR, absurd card. It's got deflect, triple attack. Sometimes that matters. Activate Battle Limit 1 for 3 energy. If you have 4 or less life, you can play this card from your hand. When this card is played, you can choose any of your opponent's battle cards and bottom deck it. That's freaking insane, right? It's an 8-drop, so of course it gets around your Gamma effect. And then it's got this 1 energy auto where if your leader is blue, when this card is added to your Z energy, you can tap the blue and then bottom your opponent's 5-drop or less. So one of your opponent's battle cards that are 5-drop or less. So that effect comes up, especially versus like Sin or really just oftentimes versus SS4 Goku Vegeta, right? So Goku Vegeta have to arrival in this card. Like this card punishes arrival so hard. They have to effectively arrival in their Gokus and Vegetas that like one of them has double strike and one of them has crit. So on the same attack that they arrived those cards, you can just combo this card out defensively, combo out of the attack, and then add it to your Z energy, and for 1 energy, remove the card they played. So like they didn't even get to attack with it, and that's so much value. And then of course it's like the okey doke of the deck. If you have 3 more energy, your opponent's going in with like a battle card that doesn't have bury, you can be like no negate and like look super sullen until they come with their whole hand. You're like, damn, that's crazy. And you slam this thing down and you bottom deck the card and the game's over. Like it has that okey doke chance, but like that like almost never comes. Maybe came up like 3 times in my entire weekend, and it's just because people are desperate to get that last attack into you, right? I played 2 copies of Blue Unison. If I was teching this deck for a blue meta, I'd play 3 copies of this instead of 2. But I was teching for a red meta, so I play 2. On the play, this card's insane versus red. On the draw, this card is terrible versus red. It's very hard to maintain this card. It's a double strike blocker. If you don't know what Boo does yet, it's Majin Buu, Assault of the Agents of Destruction. It's very worth reading. And then Baby Hatchiyak, Saiyan Destroyer was the SCR of my choice. Once again, teching for red. If you're teching for blue, Gohan Beast SCR is probably better. It lets you do a really cool play on turn 7 where you can Gohan Beast, play it, bottom deck one of your opponent's life, clear their field, and then you can untap the 2 energy with Gohan Beast and then play Android Turning the Tide and get Dirty Bursted to not be able to attack for the turn. But that is a really cool play versus blue. There are some other plays with Gohan Beast where you can like use it to play the Android 21 that burns your opponent for a life. So that's pretty cool too. I chose Baby Hatch, obviously, just adds another floodgate to the deck. This deck just gets better as the turns go further. So, like, I say that, but it's actually horrible in the ramp. But, like, versus, like, non-ramp, other mid-range and aggro decks, this deck just gets better than those as the games get further. So that's the entire main deck, 52 cards, like I said. I'll quickly go over the side deck and why I chose some of these cards. That's not going to be relevant anymore because the format's going to be totally different after Nationals, but here we go. I side decked all 3 copies of Android 18 Let the Battle Begin. This is mainly for red games 2 and 3. I know I said I tech for red, but I didn't expect anybody to be maining Broly Crown. 2 people did, and they got some cards out of my hand. But other than that, like, Broly Crown's not great in a red meta, like if you're expecting red meta, right? So this card's really good versus Rogue, though, and shockingly really good versus Blue, because you can bottom deck the Airy Beerus. But like versus Rogue, you can hit almost any battle card 4-drop or less. And then versus Red, of course, it hits the Broly Crown, so you can trade 1 energy for 1 energy now, and then you get a blocker, and they get nothing. So that's pretty cool. It's also 15k attacker, which is what you'll do with it if it survives to your turn, because every deck can clear it once it goes back to their next turn. So you might as well get the value out of attacking with it. Yeah, this card can't be searched by the this dude, but it can be searched by all the other guys because it's an android, and so that's super cool. 2 copies of Shin Nova Supremacy, obviously for Sin Shenron and the Gogeta BR deck. And then, of course, if you're on the draw versus SS4 Goku and Vegeta, this card comes in as well. Just because on your turn 3, you don't have to rely on finding a Dirty Burst. You can slam this card, draw a card, and then they can't attack with 7 or higher for the rest of their next turn. It's also good versus Vegito for the same exact effect. Even if they have a developed Vegito or Potara, you can play this and then buy yourself another turn versus the bigger threats. I play 1 copy of Barrier Hope. This was like my respect to Gogeta Burr deck. If they play the Broly SCR and then they just don't charge after turn 2, you actually can't clear that in your main deck at all. So this lets you just pay 3 and clear it. It also has some value versus Sin Shenron because it lets you clear the barrier sins while drawing 2, so that's cool. It says 0 for 5k always. And then so begins my anti-blue side deck choices. So 1 Absolute Release Ball, 2 Monkeys, and 2 God Sealing Techniques, right? All of these do the same thing. They're there to stop floodgates, right? Absolute Release Ball can be played on your opponent's turn. These all have to be played on your turn, unless you, forget. Like your energy. In that case, then these are live on your opponent's turn, but nobody's ever going to fall for that at a higher caliber play, right? So this hits 3 drops or less and untaps the energy. Fun fact, you can Sparking this in your deck as you play multicolor energy, and if you Sparking it, you can actually untap a tapped energy instead of like paying 0 for it. You can actually pay +1 for it, so that's cool. These are for the higher cost floodgates, and then of course these are for like Hatch and other floodgates. I mean, it just gives you a good finisher versus blue. 2 copies of Koitsukai, because also blue. It also punishes floodgates from coming in, but it also punishes other decks like Mill Cooler, Red Launch, like anything that tries to play heavily on your turn, which like there are a lot of decks out there that try this, right? Like Android 16. Like, this card is really good versus stuff like that. 1 copy of Kami, because yellow decks go way too wide with so much barrier, especially that monkey deck. This lets you go just clear that whole field and ask them to start over. And of course, like versus Trunks Cheetah, it pretty much takes your opponent's entire field out. And of course, you'll just get all 3 energy back for it. And then finally 1 copy of Jiren, Survival of the Fittest. So this is one of those cards that you kind of just have to, like, say you have. and your opponent has to believe you. So the way you use this card is once your opponent gets to like near their 7 energy plays or their turns where they're going to kill you with Turning Tide, you kind of just have to not use 2 energy or 2 or 3 energy on your turns, and then just pat and not use this auto. That way you can just hold this up, right? Whether you have it or not. That way it derails your opponent from playing Android Turning the Tide. Of course, if they're in a desperate scenario, then you can just not. Then, of course, you just catch him and you okie doke him for the game. This is like just my prevention from Android Turning Tide, because that card does slaughter you in the decks that are built to play with it. And then finally in the Z deck, I played 2 copies of Cell. There was only one time I wish I had a third. I played 1 copy of this Goku. Goku's snapped. It for 2 Z energy and 2 energy, you can play it. It's got Deflect Barrier. It bottom decks cards out of your opponent's hands until they have only 10 left. So that's pretty cool. And then it can give your twins, like the green-blue twins, 10k and triple strike as an activate battle speed. So that's pretty cool. I played 2 copies of Beerus Area Annihilator. This card is ridiculous. Of course, the fact that this deck gets 3 energy back every turn means that you can play this on 2/4. Like you can set up on 3 and then or you can just all in on it on 4 to clear a bunch of battle cards. So that's pretty cool. It's also your best answer into like Boo Unison, since it has a barrier. It's a barrier attacker, just like your Android, but it becomes a 20k and a 25k barrier attack. So it's like 2 markers off Boo, which is actually huge. And then for some tech Z cards, I play 1 copy of Frieza. It lets you KO, like when you're just looking to spend 1 Z energy and you have the 2 green, it's better to just spend, and you only need to kill like 1 battle card. This card's way better. It just kills a 5-drop or less. And of course, if you can pair it with your twins, that's a ridiculous request, because you either have to have the twins developed or you have to have 3 green energy. But if you do pair it with the twins, you can get a little bit of hand destruction out of it. That never comes up. It's also got double strike, so you can like sneak in a cool double strike, maybe clear a Unison. That's where the value. But the value really comes in. It's just a quick 2 energy, 1 Z energy removal skill. If you really didn't want to play this, you could play like a 3rd Cell. You could play the SH of Vegeta to like do the same thing this Goku does, but actually attack. There's a lot of things this slot can be. And then the Jiren the Immovable was actually ridiculous. I killed like 3 or 4 Gogetas Unisons and like 2 or 3 Boo Unisons on day 1 with this card for 2 green and 2 Z energy of any color, because the Z energy doesn't matter for those who don't know. You can play this card. It's got Deflect. Freaking nuts. When this card is played, you can choose itself. You can really choose any green card, but most of the time you're going to choose itself. It can't be removed by skills until the end of your opponent's next turn. You can also choose the twins if you really wanted to. It kind of gives them a pseudo barrier. That sometimes matters versus Sin. I actually lied. It doesn't, because they just neg it and it dies. But what matters is it's Activate Main allows you to place any number of your Z energy in your drop area, and then you can choose up to your opponent. Like, this is an Activate Main, so you can do it every turn if you have the Z energy for it. But you can choose up to one of your opponent's Unisons and remove a marker for each Z energy you place in the drop area, right? Like, that's super cool. If you have just a plethora of Z energy, you can just dome Unisons in 1 turn. And then, of course, if you choose 2 or more Z energies, it gains double strike and 10k for the turn. So that's super cool too. Like, versus Boo, that's actually huge. So think about it. If you have 4 Z energy, you can pay 2, right? You can play it. It's got Deflect. You give itself the to protect itself from being removed, so Boo can't even bottom deck this now, right? Send 2 Z energy away, so now Boo goes down to 2 markers, and then you just swing at Boo. For 4 Z energy and 2 greens, you can kill a Boo. Or if you have 6 Z energy, you can just play it, kill the Boo for all 4 of your Z energy, and then swing at Leader or something else. Like, this card actually does bad work in this deck. That's the entire deck. Nats was super fun. I'm proud of myself day 1. Kind of bummed out about how I did day 2, but I mean, we all can improve, right? Got to meet a lot of you. That was super fun. Like, probably my favorite part of going to any event. Got to talk to a bunch of you about different deck ideas and different things that we're doing. Got to catch up with a lot of my friends. And on that note, actually, shout out to my friends from Fort Walton Beach. Shout out to, as usual, my Miami crew, Fox PPG, for hosting such a sick Nationals and for having such a sick group of guys to play with. Shout out for Robert Reezy for hosting me for somewhere to stay while I was down there. I wasn't even sure I was going to be able to play this weekend, but I'm really glad I did. And I will catch you guys next time.